Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome back to The Plant Path. I'm your host, Sage Popham, founder of Natura Sophia Spagyrics and the School of Evolutionary Herbalism. And I am excited to be presenting to you today an interview that I did with Kathleen Maier. And she is a fantastic herbalist who's been at it for quite some time. And I was really honored to get a chance to chat with her today. This was an interview long coming. We were supposed to do it multiple times in the past, and it just schedules didn't line up and things didn't work out. And so we finally got it to happen. And it was a very enjoyable interview, if I might say so myself. At least it was for me. Hopefully it will be for you too. And I think we'll probably have Kat back on the show in the future. So what did we talk about? Well, we covered a lot of ground. You know, first off, I really wanted to hear her talk a little bit more about her book, Energetic Herbalism, which came out a couple of years ago. And I really like that book. It covers the concept of energetics from a wide range of perspectives and orientations, and it's very, very good. And I highly recommend everybody check out her book. But we talked about her book a bit and what her inspiration was for her book, and some of the key aspects of that book, some of the main takeaways, specifically like what is energetics, and what are the uniting principles of energetics cross-culturally, worldwide, that apply regardless of where you are, who you are, where you're from, what time it is. What are the universalities that we see present in the practice of herbal medicine? So we talked about that. We also talked about some of her new projects that she's working on, specifically in terms of clinical herbalism mentoring. Kat ran a clinical program for a very long time. And so she shared some of her insights. We talked about that transition between student herbalist to practicing herbalist, and what are the walls that we come up against in that transition? What are the things that hold us back? She shares a lot about some of the practical things of being a clinical herbalist that can be very easy to overlook, and can be major things that hold people back. Everything from how you're running your business, how you're getting your clients, how you're promoting yourself, how you're organizing things, your books, your files, your finances. How do you manage all of that? To the legalities, all of those things. And she's really, really good at all of that. And she had some really fantastic insights into that I think will serve all of you very, very well. We also talked about some of her work in terms of aid and providing herbal services to people in need of help. So, in terms of things like disaster relief, with the current flooding that's been happening a few weeks ago, at the time of this recording, in Texas, Hurricane Helene had happened. So talking about how does it work when you've got people that need help and have herbalists on the ground providing some relief, providing some care. Companies say want to donate. This is, I thought, an interesting question where, there was, I forget which, it might have been during Hurricane Helene or one of the big hurricanes or some sort of natural disaster. And, folks were asking for donations, and we had sent probably a couple $1,000s worth of our spagyrics to help support. And it was kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, off they go, there goes UPS truck. It's like, I hope it makes it there, and I hope it gets in the hands of someone that can use it, and that people can get help from it. And so Kat was talking about in terms of what happens when in a disaster area and someone's organizing herbal support for people and the products are coming in. Like, what do you do with it? How do you organize it? What happens when it gets there? How do you distribute it? All this stuff that I had never really thought of, the incredible amount of planning and detail that one would have to get into in order to organize all of that in an efficient way. So we talked about that too. It was a very fascinating conversation. I'm going to let you experience it for yourself. So still working out some little technical things here with recording podcasts in a video. For some reason, the quality is just not as crispy as my intro is here. So you'll have to apologize if you're watching. There's just maybe when the camera's on me, don't look, because it's all a little pixelated and the audio's a little out of sync. We'll try to clean it up as best we can. If you're obviously just listening, then that's not a big deal. But we're working out some technicalities on how to get a higher quality video for these interviews. I live way out. For those of you that don't know, I live way out in the mountains, and so I'm on satellite internet. Sometimes it's a little glitchy. Sometimes it cuts in and out. I'm very thankful for the technology to be able to be online way out in the middle of nowhere. But nonetheless, it's not always the greatest quality. So thanks for bearing with me on that. And thank you very much for your time and your attention here today and joining me here on The Plant Path. And I hope you enjoy my interview here with Kat Maier. All right, Kat, well, welcome. Thank you very much for joining me here on The Plant Path. It's really good to have you.
Oh, Seja, I've been so looking forward to this. I'm very excited for this. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, I want to start off talking about this tome right here. I got your book, Energetic Herbalism, and I was flipping through it and read a number of chapters. I haven't read it cover to cover as of yet, but I have spent a good amount of time in there, and I absolutely love it. So I want to talk a little bit about your book, and I want to hear more about your work as a whole. And so tell me, why did you write Energetic Herbalism? Like, what was the inspiration for you to really zoom in on this approach to herbal medicine? Because you've been doing this for a long time. You've been seeing clients for a long time. I'm assuming you saw this as a needed thing to really communicate to the herbal community to make sure that they understand. So I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about kind of, I guess, your story and creating that book and why you see it as important.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you. And it's so funny because I was saying earlier, writing the book, and I'm sure you experienced this as well, writing a book sends you deeper into research. And you realize that you've been carrying on certain urban myths that when you have a great publisher who wants you to footnote and have everything really researched, you realize, oh my goodness, where did this come from? And so one of the things is during the writing of the book, I kind of lived in your book. And we share the same teachers. We share Matthew, we share Stephen, of course, Rosemary, but as far as energetic herbalism, I just really loved, a deep dive into my teachers, into your book. And one of the reasons that I wanted to write on this topic is, it took me 30 years to realize, where does Western herbalism begin? And so, as you know, TCM, Ayurveda, Nani Tib, all of these phenomenal global systems, they have energetic language just from the get-go. And so maybe some people were brought up by tissue states. I wasn't. I'm a physician assistant. I started with plants in the Peace Corps a long, long time ago. But I really wanted to reach, low-income folks and urban folks. So I thought, well, I might need a medical degree. But then I really came at Western herbalism from that biomedicine, which most of us do. Here's a formula for bronchitis. Here's an asthma formula. And so over the course of my journey, it unraveled and became revealed that, oh my goodness, this is where we should be starting. As you know, I don't know what to say to you, but echinacea is a cold herb. It clears toxic heat. And so we've been giving it for colds and flus, and no wonder the Lancet study said, echinacea doesn't work. It's a cold herb. And so when those kind of light bulbs go off, it's our duty, if you will, as teachers, as practitioners, is, oh my God, I found this truth. And it doesn't matter how late in life we come to the truth. That's part of the process. So studying with Matthew, studying with traditional, TCM. I had a deep, deep TCM teacher, and we worked in that way. So he, in some ways, rewrote a curriculum for me in the Western language with his, it's like your first language, right? So his first language is energetics. And then we kind of translate things. So I had a great background in energetics and then understanding that the eclectics, the Western energetics, Greek humoral, we have this. It's just in some ways that forgotten language, even though Paul Bergner, an amazing colleague of yours and mine, and Matthew, they've been writing about it. I thought, how you can have many plant ID books and it's just the lens. Here's a plant ID book is from a medicine maker. Here's a plant ID book from a grower, to have your voice, my voice, Mad's voice. Because even though energetics is intuitive and it's like, oh, the light bulb just went off, it still is all the different lenses, whether it's an astrological lens, whether it's a clinical example. So that was really one of the main reasons. And then I was looking at closing my school in the way I'm still working, but I was closing my 3-year intensive clinical program. And in some ways, this is my curriculum, save clinical practicum. So I thought, okay, well, if I'm closing my school, here's what I teach over the 3-year course, aside from clinic. So, that was really the impetus to write this book and to really bring it all together.
Love it. So we're using this term energetic, and I find this is a word that gets thrown around and used in the modern world in a lot of different contexts. And I think while as an herbalist, I hear you say the word energetic, have a very clear understanding what you mean when you say the word energetic. There might be some folks in the audience that hear the word energetic and they might think of, maybe you're talking about the aura from the plant, or maybe you're talking about a psycho-spiritual attribute of the plant, which is not really what you're talking about, right? And the way that I tend to, even though it's a thing, that's oftentimes when we're speaking about herbal energetics from a traditional standpoint, like you're talking about, the way I tend to think of it is we're looking at kind of it's like the dichotomy of body as machine versus body as ecosystem, or body as reflection of nature. And to me, the energetic model is really that shift in looking at a person and how the human body is put together as a composition of natural forces and ecosystems, and that plants grow in ecosystems and embody those natural forces too. And that when we put a plant in the body, it's going to affect the ecological habitat of our organs and our systems and our tissues in very particular ways. That's a little different than thinking, oh, this herb modulates cyclooxygenase levels, or this herb is oxytocic or antihistamine, or whatever like you were talking about biomedical, and how I feel like too, and we could talk about this more too, that I think moving forward, like the future of herbal medicine is this integration of a traditional energetic model with science, that in the same person can talk about an herb's biochemical antihistamine effect and also talk about its traditional Greek humoral energetics, and that those don't have to be competing models in the way that we think about herbs. So I'm just curious to hear. I'm curious to hear what you think about all that, and how do you think about defining energetics? Like and there's someone that says, "Hey, Kat, I don't know what do you mean when you say energetics? How do you like to define that?"
Oh, well, thank you. So there's a lot there. And first of all, I want to talk about medicine of place, because that is a chapter I go into, and it might be, if people get my book, one, it's not a cover to cover read, so I'm glad. It's more, pick it up and, sit with this and then walk away and kind of contemplate and let it move through you. So I do have a chapter called Medicine of Place, and it's exactly what you're talking about when we look at these plants picking up the landscape and becoming the landscape, and we become the landscape. We move to the desert and we have a different relationship in some ways with life. The lens changes. We move into the deep fungal mycorrhizal forests of the Northwest, and things shift. And so when I take those desert plants, they're clearing, they're drying, the Mormon tea, they pick up that landscape and they definitely affect our landscape. I live in Virginia in the rich Shenandoah Appalachians, and we have a lot of those growing by the stream, the joe pie, the hydrangea roots, those plants that really get into our waterways and separate and clear and cleanse. And so that energetics is medicine of place, which isn't my elevator pitch, because I'm talking, that's when I'm talking to you and your beautiful plant community who understand this. And I'll get back to the elevator pitch, but I also really want to thank you for bringing this up, because I'm a teacher, native teacher, and this is not how they regard energetics. Energetics is really density and light. And for them, energetics is not hot, cold, damp, dry. And so one of the things that's always important, and I'm so grateful that you brought this up, is that we don't have a hold on, well, what is energetics? Even though these different global traditions and your book and maybe my book, and we're looking at that landscape, there are many healing traditions. And this isn't the New Age, what you're kind of referring to. This is not New Age at all. This is 12,000 years. This is 10,000 years. This is, skilled practitioners and healers and medicine people that can see the energy. Is it moving through? Oh, what's the blockage? What's happening here? And it has nothing to do with the energetics that you and I are talking about. And I too have been trained in that as well. That is not my system to teach. And so, right, it's just so wonderful to really have this conversation here, that we can really let other folks know that energetics can have different meanings. And kind of coming back to our systems and how we hold it, it's old age. This is ancient. There's nothing new age. There is nothing transient or fad about this, because, it's the earth. Fire is fire, and it's been from the beginning. And then the first presence of water, what was that first droplet like? What did that do? And the impacts of that constituent, if you will. I mean, for me, the constituents are that sacred language. There's nothing more magnificent or psychedelic than these long-chained, chemicals. Let's talk about fractals. Let's talk about, that whole other vision of that psychedelic world. And that's the chemistry. Jim Duke, our beloved former Jim Duke, he was always talking about the spirit molecule. And I'm not talking about what some people think of it from that book. But anyway, the energetics, it's all of it. And how you have taught so beautifully in your classes is, really understanding, okay, we have inflammation. And so that's hot and that's red. And to look intuitively, oh my gosh, berries and antioxidants, they're cooling foods. So that if we just know a few basics, it's like, oh, well, what are cooling foods? Oh, will that make a difference? And so when we don't have, say, echinacea to clear toxic heat, self-heal, plantain, they clear heat, and they are a lot of places. So I love this language that we are now talking about, and the energetics that you and I are talking about, with that landscape, with that, who are we in relationship to nature? Because in this sustainable, to really make the word sustainable come alive in herbalism, we are not shipping our plants in from India. We are not shipping them in from, where's rhodiola coming from? What is this happening? And who's growing in the Appalachians? What do we have? So I think my elevator pitch, just to kind of go from the wide angle, coming on down to, it is about ourself as nature and our landscape, and how do we work with our terrain, our inner terrain. It's so funny during COVID, the terrain theory got so dissed, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, here we are again. They're back at it.
Yeah.
Raising kind of the shadow, but it is our terrain. I mean, I'm Pitta, I run hot. I have my summer hibiscus drink here. I have to. But how fabulous that we as plant people can change the shift and the terrain, coming into the times that we're coming into.
Well, I love that you're talking about terrain, and it is interesting because I noticed that too during COVID. It's like all of a sudden, all these folks that would really had a very holistic mindset, all of a sudden started thinking really allopathically again, and I think what's interesting too is that it's oftentimes that that conversation I think is a good, or that topic is a good example of, I think these seemingly dichotomies that I don't really necessarily see as either or. It's like, oh, it's either the terrain or it's the germ, and it has to be one or the other. I'm like, I think it's a little bit of both. Like, I think the terrain is creating the environment and the opportunity for the pathogen to be able to have an effect. So it's not really either or. It's like these are both contributing factors. And I think there's a lot of examples of that. I mean, I feel there's an undercurrent in my work, and in my assumption is in your work, even just by the way that you speak about it, of also with the science and with the spirituality and with, traditional systems and modern understandings and the chemistry and I feel like there's ways that we can, and to me, that's the path forward in herbal medicine. It's like the pendulum maybe swung really into that biomedical world strongly, and maybe people wanted to just be in that and kind of shy away from tradition or shy away from energetics. We want to be taken real seriously by the medical establishment. And it's like, well, I think there's a way that we can do both. So one thing that I want to ask you about this premise of energy, like you talked about coming into herbalism with much more of a biomedical background. So were you treating clients working with clients strictly with that biomedical background, and then at some point brought energetics into the mix, or was the energetics already there? And if it wasn't, did you notice a shift in your success and your ability to work and treat people properly when you brought energetics? I'm just kind of curious about the timeline was like, and how that kind of shifted how you work with people.
Sure. And I hope this is okay. I'd love to go back for 1 minute, because you talked a lot about fabulous things, and I've never heard this. And so when we're talking about the shift, that pendulum, and that's a pattern. And you and I are both pattern devotees, that's kind of what gets us up in the morning. And, I was looking at us trying to schedule this, and you had things come up and I had things come up, and then it was far away on the calendar. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, let's do this. And hey, there was a date. And I looked at it was the buck full moon, or the wart full moon, the Celtic time to harvest. And it was Capricorn. And I thought, oh, of course, the Capricorn full moon is going to get us together to
get some work done.
Get some work done and get this stuff out there, because Lord knows we need it. So the patterns, and so for COVID, and I've never heard anybody say this, and your love and understanding of Ayurveda, how I saw COVID was such a Vata time. I mean, we woke up in the United States and we watched it move and change, and it's coming literally across the globe. And my teacher, Candace Canton, taught me Vata means that which moves. And so literally we watched, this virus move across. We woke up every day. Where is it moving? And the nervousness of that, the anxiety, and then it's on the air. And so there were so many Vata qualities, and we were so ungrounded. So so many ways, yes, we did immune and elder, and, if people needed biomedicine, we got them where they needed to. But it was also a time I just really pacified Vata during that time.
Yeah.
And I think we haven't really recovered from that. So anyway, just wanted to share that with you because I learned so much from you in that patterning. And as we look at, larger patterns, if we're looking at the landscape now of what's happening, trusting we will swing back out of this. So to answer your question, so I was trained as a physician assistant. Interestingly, I went to Hahnemann Medical School in Philadelphia, and there wasn't a drop of homeopathy to be found. It had totally converted to an allopathic medical school.
Interesting.
So I graduated, honors, the whole thing, okay, I'm ready to go do rural medicine. And, I believe there's a dream dreaming us. And I had this dream. I'm going to go work as an allopath for 5 years. I'm going to see rashes and learn how to stitch and do minor surgery and, get all my skills. And then I'll begin to weave plants and, herbs and natural healing. Well, the dreaming me, and also probably that was deep in my soul, was I went right into herbalism. And I worked for minimum wage out of medical school on an herb farm that taught biodynamics. That was this whole other pattern. And so I worked in biodynamics and herbalism and making flowered wreaths, to hustle. And I want to say that because young herbalists, it's like, no, we hustled. We had a couple of different jobs. This is not one of those professions that you're like, okay, I won 6 figures. You got to hustle. So I was making flower wreaths out of medical school. And so it was that patterning. So then I just stayed as an herbalist, and I consciously let go of my licensure as a physician assistant because there's more liability when you're a licensed professional and you're bringing in plant medicines. And a lot of my students are docs and nurses and nurse practitioners and PAs. And so a lot of times we bring judgment to these practitioners of, well, why aren't you blending, or why aren't you doing more? And one of the things is the constructs of the legality. So as a PA, here's a strep, and I have a protocol, and I have to follow this protocol to treat strep. And if I veer away from that protocol, then I'm liable for malpractice. And
Interesting.
It's a really important concept that people don't realize that, when I go to my doc or PCP or whatever, I want to be a really good allopath. We have enough really good practitioners. And so functional medicine now is addressing that. But functional medicine still is kind of loaded with lots of expenses and supplements. And hopefully we can get to talk about mutual aid and herbal mutual aid and accessibility. But the thing is about merging is those allopathic practitioners that do step out of the box, yay on you, because they're putting themselves at risk. So it's back at the system. And I remember sitting on a panel with Andy Weil way, way back. I'm talking 40 years. And we were talking about medical training. And he said, yeah, you go through medical school and then you have herbalism at the end. And I'm like, absolutely not. You have herbalism at the beginning. Show them what can be done with plants. Show them how far you can go with plants, right? It's kind of like start with antibiotics and then move.
Yeah.
And so
build up from there. Yeah.
Start with plants, start with the natural world, start with the truth of our body is always searching for homeostasis, and then go in and say, okay, it needs help near it. Now it needs surgery. Now it needs this. So, I never worked as an allopath. I think part of my success in my practice was I had that language. I would advertise, I was a PA, and I think people took comfort in the fact that I understood the language. They came with blood work. They came with this. Your clinical training, my clinical training is really bringing herbalists up to a really good place, because you do have to understand what are your clients arriving. Try to keep going, but
I think that's a very interesting point. where just there's a lot of politics in medicine, and there's a lot of legalities, and there's a lot of complicated things involved there that can really limit what people are able to do. And sometimes I hear people out there really like, rah, 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 let's get herbal licensure. And I'm kind of like, I don't know how I feel about that, because as soon as now there's some sort of governmental body that dictates what you can and what you cannot do. And I think that kind of, in a way, strips away the potency of what herbal medicine is able to do, because we treat the individual, not the disease. We treat the people, right? And I feel like that's something that's been hammered in me from day one. As as an herbalist, we don't treat a disease, we treat a person, the whole person, right?
Absolutely. And then you have Matt with his drop doses. You have 5 mils TID or QID for a heroic dose. If we had licensure, we could not have that variability. And maybe that's changing, Sage. I do want to say maybe the licensure is changing in allopathy. The writings on the wall when they realize all these people are spending out of pocket money. And also, we again, stepping back as an elder, I'm really trying to hold this place of the bigger picture. It's not the individuals, it's the systems. And so what's insurance covering? What are different things covering? And how do we as herbalists create our own system, our own network?
Yes.
Supporting each other, and it's the long view as well, whether it's, mutual aid or however that is. And absolutely, I have sat in AHG, out of AHG, back in, broke up again, in and out. I have said, yes, we need licensure, we need third-party payment, we need folks that can't afford medical care to have access. And I am thoroughly with you now. Absolutely. Keep licensure out, because we have freedom. We have absolute, total freedom. We're allowed to have spirit move through us. We're allowed to have native. We're allowed to have Appalachian. We're allowed to have people that cannot read practice profound herbalism. And so we're the protectors. I think herbalists steward land, we steward bioregions, and we steward our craft. Like we are like kind of the doulas of the craft, keeping, government and regulations but by doing really safe work. And I mean, look at it. I've been doing this for 45 years, and no person has ever, other than physicians, have been called in. So that says a lot. When I teach in medical schools, and they're always, the young fourth years, they just put on the white coat, bless their hearts. They're like, well, what about safety? And I say, well, let's see, we had like 58,000 deaths from hepatotoxicity from Tylenol.
Yeah.
And, I'm trying not to be sarcastic, but it's like, let's really look at these numbers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So go receive
58,000 from Tylenol. How much herbs? One person has a tummy ache from an herb, and it's like groundbreaking news, It's like,
right. And, stay away from ginseng leaves. I'm a huge fan of poke. I'm a huge fan of lobelia. But you really need clinical training in that, because these are powerful medicines. And I've taught classes on sort of those, not toxic botanicals, belladonna. I haven't been trained in that. So, but it's really having that dialogue, bringing the worlds together. But I think the worlds can be together with a good referral system, like having a doc or an allopath know me and refer and say, oh, go see her. You don't need this. That's, IBS. You can do this with herbs. And for me, it's that horizontal. Is that horizontal? That referral system, and we can get our own blood work. But, I want to send somebody to a good practitioner that I trust that will say, okay, now go back to Kat. Let's get your work, and then let's work together here, because they might have hospital privileges or different things like that. So it's that collaborative way of working. So, and that's happening. I really, really believe that's happening.
Well, I am relieved to hear that. Like, I think that's a really good thing, and this is something that I've been starting to think about a lot more lately in terms of, like you're speaking of, integrative. How does the herbalist become somehow integrated and trusted by the medical community, and recognized as having value to offer to people? And at the same time too, I think of, and maybe this kind of gets into, and I've heard you mention it a few times. You mentioned it in the notes too, mutual aid. I don't know what that is, so I'm curious to hear more about that. But I want to share a few thoughts, and I want to hear what you think about it. So the cost factor, right, with an herbalist, like you said, herbalists, like, we're hustlers, right? We're constantly working to try to, make a living for ourselves, because it's not exactly it's not like, let's just say, it's not like the way I was told as a kid of, like, oh, go to college and get a degree and you're gonna get out and there's just gonna be like a great job waiting for you and it's gonna be super. It's like, that was not my experience of it, and it's a lot of work. And I think that brings up a factor of, how does the clinical herbalist on their end make a decent living for themselves and support themselves? How do they do it in a way, though, and have services be available to people that may not be able to afford, $80 an hour or $60 an hour, or, if people are charging, say, $60 for an hour of their time, plus the cost of remedies, that can get very expensive very quickly for people. And so there's this interesting balancing act here of, okay, how does herbal medicine become available to people and affordable for people so that it's a viable option, because it is out of pocket. And if they're used to going to a doctor and they pay a $10 copay and insurance covers the rest. But then how does the herbalist make sure that they're able to, keep food on the table and a roof over the head of their families, right? So I don't know. Curious to hear your thoughts about all that.
Yeah, lots of thoughts on that.
Let's hear them.
Yeah. No, just so juicy. I mean, all of this is just so wonderful. And so one of the things with clinical, and I don't have a school anymore. I'm not hustling my school. But what I did in the 3-year clinical training, and it wasn't just weekends, it was weekly. It was a lot of hours. In the 3rd year, we ran a free clinic, and we did lots and lots of writing soap notes, liability, all the boring, dry kind of how to keep safe in a practice. And so you have a clinical training. I have a clinical training now online with Patricia Howell.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are, I think, thousands of herbalists who have done program after program after program, and they're not practicing. And I'm like,
yeah.
Come on, y'all. We're
How do
going
we get them to push through that boundary, right? Because there's a blockage. There's a blockage that people hit, right?
I think you're right. I think it's a valid blockage. I think intuitively students are realizing I am not ready to step out there because they haven't watched somebody do an intake. They haven't seen how do you do it in apothecary? How do you do lot numbers? How do you prevent liability? How do you have a safe, FDA compliant home apothecary? It's totally doable. And so in my 3rd year, they wrote a vision statement. They got, they had to do research. They had to figure out, how am I going to start this practice? And I think for a lot of people, most of my students are women. So sometimes if they co-own a house, the other house owner is, and doesn't have to be women, men, doesn't matter. But the safety, where's this liability? So we go through, have a homeowner's policy, have a waiver, all this really important stuff that is taught in medical school. You wouldn't think of going through other training without, okay, here's how you are safe. Here's how you hold space. Here's how you take notes. This is what goes in the file. This is what you never write down. This is what, you write down and you don't write down. And this is how you send send emails. And this is what you don't say in an email. And emails can be subpoenaed. I'm telling you, I've done this 40, 50 years. I've been subpoenaed one time, and it was by a student who was in a car accident. And I'm like, girl, I can't believe you did that. Unfortunately, my email was perfect. But so these are the considerations that I don't think we need to be licensed to teach our students. But these are really important considerations so that when they have these, when we do our course and students finish, they're like, oh my God, I feel like I can go out there now and get my ducks in a row, so to speak, and figure out how to be safe. What about liability insurance? What about all of these things? And so it's safety for the individual, but it's also safety for the client. Because if I'm kind of out there not knowing what I'm doing, and, I converted a pig shed into my client room, and I was a rural herbalist forever, and I had certain students like we are DIY, back DIY. And, how do you look professional? How do you be professional? But how do you stay authentic to the fact that we are herbalists? So I think in our own profession, we need, which is why AHG sometimes has those courses of, all right, stay safe. And how do you honor? This is about sacred. Confidentiality is about sacredness for me. And I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, and it's a small town. And I'm at a concert last night, literally, and I see all these past clients. And how do you speak to people? How do you not even say, anyway, I won't go into the weeds there, but there's a lot of those practices. And then the mutual aid. This is a project that is so incredibly exciting now. Lorna Mana Braddock of Herbalista in Atlanta is my teacher and mentor and has been for a number of years. Please, y'all, look up herbalista.org. Profound website. And she worked in Atlanta, Georgia, and she did lots and lots of foot care at the Harriet Tubman Free Clinic in Atlanta because her teaching is that unhoused folks, their feet are their home. And when you treat their feet, whether they're diabetic, they are safer, they are protected. That's who they are. Their health depends so much on foot care. And so she did these major trainings of foot care, and to see these photographs of these unhoused coming in with these beautiful herbalists, with clinical techniques, with their gloves and the lavender baths and washing the feet of these individuals who, where did they just come from that morning, and how do they leave respected? It's profound. So Lorna is my teacher. So when the Helene hurricane happened, I realize I'm talking kind of fast.
No, it's good. That's good. I'm following right along. I move quick too, so I get it.
I know. Good. Rapid. It's just so fun. So when Helene happened in North Carolina, Hurricane Helene, and I got in touch with Lorna. Well, let me go back a ways. I had started Botanica Mobile Clinic. It was a free clinic. And when the Pulse massacre happened in Orlando, Emily Ruff and her team went in and they did profound grief relief, grief support. And so Emily taught me a lot about how to move in different times. Going to Standing Rock, I had the honor of serving at Standing Rock and learning a tremendous amount about mutual aid. And mutual aid, again, look it up. I'm just speaking to your readers. Mutual aid it's the origin, Tolkien, the origin of mutual aid is the true, clear, sacred anarchy. It's when the government, when the powers that be don't show up, we are there. That's what mutual aid. Mutual aid is Black Panthers. Mutual aid goes back for eons, and it's a concept that has been with us for a long, long time. So it's such a fascinating history of mutual aid. It's always free. It's not barter. Yes, we can trade within it. So I learned about different aspects from Emily. I started the Botanica Free Clinic because I have a clinical training and I wanted my students to get real deal work and experience. And then in 2017, Unite the Right, we had the invasion of white supremacists in Charlottesville. And so that was another mobilizing where we showed up. And how do you support a community in trauma, a community in grief, and it lingers. This isn't, just a weekend and it's over. The BLM protests, we showed up with street medics. And how do we support them? And so I've been working in this for a while. And so when Hurricane Helene came, got in touch with Lorna, and I said, all right, here we go. And I said, Lorna, we have to stop responding to each of these crises one at a time. We're in it now. Now we're going forward. This is our new reality. This is our landscape. And especially now with less governmental help. So we decided to set up the Herbal Mutual Aid Directory. And we don't have a website. We can put it in the show notes, hopefully, but it's Bitly. It's a Bitly website, Herbal Mutual Aid. But so we set up and we started in North Carolina, and we were fortunate because North Carolina, Asheville had a lot of great herbalists on the ground, right? There's folks there that we could work with. So what
seems to be a hub. Seems to be a big hub of herbalists in
great hub. The response was amazing. But what was interesting is not a lot of skilled, trained clinicians. They're definitely clinicians. I don't want to take anything from the folks that were there, but it just brought back to mind, yes, we have great herbalists. We can do herbal shares, but who can go in and work with wounds, work with infections beyond.
Right. Yeah.
So just to wrap that up, what this herbal directory is, and next week we're having a larger meeting, a meeting of the minds, where we set up a map, we set up a Google map, and we have all these places now in North Carolina. You're either a free clinic, you're a distribution site, you are a grower, or there's another category. And then the LA fire happened. We did the same thing in LA. So I've been still sending herbs to LA, lung herbs, trauma herbs, lavender inhalers, simple things that my community, we get together, we make medicines, and then we send them out. So now that this is happening, we're looking back to okay, how do we do that? Because what we learned in Standing Rock is there was this massive response from the herbal community, like profound. But what happened was there was no system of receiving them, and they just piled up. And in the right, I would get these beautiful tincture bottles from, Flower Power, New York City, and with hearts and skull cap, and we love you, stand strong. But I couldn't give that to somebody I didn't know because I don't know the ingredients. So
exactly.
Super organized. We're super organized now. We're getting it together. Here's the label.
Here's what we need. Yeah.
Exactly. So all of that is on the herbal directory. And this is awesome because, you have quite an amazing audience. So our quest right now is, okay, how do we take this out to our continent and have people on the map? And we need people that are going to be there for at least a year or two. We don't want to be gatekeepers, but we don't want to have sort of a flower essence maker who would love to volunteer, but is going to be moving in a month. We're trying to gather resources, mutual aid resources, so that if something happens in South Dakota, there's one herbalist that might serve as, I'll be that mutual aid go-to person. So this is long-term. This is that long vision of let's get this network. Let's get that mycelium. Let's be taking care of ourselves. And then I want to know exactly where I'm sending my herbs because I want to make sure they're not sitting in some storeroom.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one thing that I've always thought of in those types of situations where, I'll see the herb community rally, around, some situation where there's large groups of people that need help and need some medical care and need is just reaching out. I mean, it's funny. I was like, what exactly is mutual aid? It's like, well, duh, Sage, put the two words together. It's helping each other out, right? Is kind of what it boils down to, it sounds like. And, but there's an incredible amount of organization to doing something like that. Hey, of like, great. I mean, there was a lot of instances where we sent out, I think it was during Helene, or I can't remember. There was something where there was a call out for remedies, and we probably sent a couple $1,000s worth of herbs out, tinctures out to someone. And Whitney and I ended up having a conversation. We're like, well, I hope they got them, and I hope they were able to get used. And I wonder if, I don't know what happened to them. And so what you're saying about the receiving end of how do you, it's one thing to rally and get things going, but how is it received? How is it distributed? How is it in the hands of people that know what they're doing with it? I mean, the level of organizational capacity for something like that is, complex, it seems like, to say the least. So it sounds like you're trying to create a network of people around the United States to be able to collaborate with. So in instances of like what the flooding that's happened in Texas, there's someone nearby that could be essentially the main point of contact to kind of organize for those people. Is that kind of what the premise is?
It's a great example. Nicole Telks, Wildflower Botanical School, great herbalist. Oh, yeah. She's been doing this work. She was at I can't remember, like 20 years ago, protest in Washington. Like, this girl has been at this game for quite a while, and we'll be meeting with her. She's in Texas, so she signed up to the directory. So, it's knowing, maybe in Minnesota, we might need somebody. Like, it is exactly that. And we're just looking for volunteers. There is no funding. The only funding is trying to get the technology. I mean, when you go look at this map, I got to give kudos to Lorna. That girl is so hot. Atlanta mama. She lives in Dublin now. She's in Dublin now, but she still is with Herbalista. The technical, the map, how it interfaces with the different systems. And to go larger, we need a website, we need more Airtable. How do we do this? How do we get organized in this way? Small potatoes. But I've been going back to Joanna Macy's. I'm prepping on this keynote, and I'm back to Joanna Macy. I don't know if you know Joanna Macy. Incredible environmentalist, activist, Buddhist. She's actually passing as we speak right now. She's 96. She worked profoundly as a biologist and scientist for nuclear proliferation. And so she's talking about basic tenets of how are we moving forward in this time as a Buddhist and also as an activist, and small measures, like all of your tinctures. Like, when you send all the amazing spagyrics that you send, you want to make sure they're received, and that drop, was there, because it all makes a difference. And so all volunteers, that's what we want to ensure, and that it's right, that they're received. So again, you can tell, that this is sort of my new, I closed this school, and sort of this is my new thing. But it's unfortunately exciting. Like, I don't want to be excited by a nationwide mutual aid crisis, response. But this is who we are, right? Like, herbalists are ground level, and can do a tremendous amount. And we've worked right alongside allopaths. I mean, we did a triage, and Sandy with the physicians would triage, this isn't going to touch it, go get fire cider vinegar. They were cold, damp pneumonia. And so the physicians knew antibiotics are going to take a while, go get fire cider. So there is a way that we can, work there, but we can't wait for acknowledgement or acceptance, because we already know we're brilliant, we're great. We've got the goods, we've got the medicine, and how to step in, in that respectful way, and labeled, and, very professionally. Not reuse things. The unhoused kind of love our teas because they said, look, they're organic and you're not sending us used things. It's how do we work? How do we work in this changing environment now? So, yeah, so thank you so much for, making space for this really, really important conversation that is really going to be coming online so much more as we go forward here.
Well, it's really, really great. And I think it's just really a testament about what I think we're all about as herbalists, which is just being there to support and help our communities and help people that are in need and bring good quality healing to the folks that are in need. That's really what it comes down to me is, I love all of the philosophy and the spirituality and the of herbal medicine, and our connection to the earth and to the plants and all that stuff. And I love the science and I love the pharmacy and the lab and all that stuff. But really, when you boil all of it down to it, it comes down to how do I help the person that's sitting right in front of me saying, can you help me? Like, I'm suffering. Can you help me? And I feel like what you're talking about here is a really cool, like you said, ground level means of achieving that. And I think that's sometimes where, we were talking earlier about, and I'd like to maybe unpack this part a little bit more. This could be an interesting conversation. You were talking about there being lots of highly trained herbalists, but that don't go into practice or that don't see clients or that don't really, maybe they've done clinical training, but they don't. And there's like there's something that, like, what is that something there that's that block? Is it a confidence thing? Is it a competence thing? Is it a fear thing? Is it I don't know. I don't know how to get the logistics together to do this. I don't know. I'm curious to hear, you've been training herbalists for a long time. Hey, what have you seen? Like, what do you think prevents people from actually extending themselves out to be of service to the people in their community?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And I think it's part and parcel of what I was saying before, in not having the business skills to stay safe. How do you create and how do you do an intake? How do you have a waiver? How do you have your file system set up? Like the basic.
So you think it's a lot of those practical things, so much, I treat cold, damp pneumonia. It's more practical stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's practical. And then it's like, I would never be, a class 5 rapid guide if I wasn't trained in class 1, class 2, class 3. So I can really appreciate herbalists' hesitancy if they have never sat in a clinic with a teacher and watched an intake, watched their body, watched their intonation. We need apprentice. We need apprentice. We need clinical training. And this is the like bag for my huge bag. And you want to watch somebody in motion. And so how I went to the clinic was, the student herbalist would do everything. Reach out, send the confirmation, send the intake, and then they would do the initial intake. And they would then say, okay, I'm going to pass it on now to my teacher. And it was myself and I had another staff member. And then I would get in the seat and then I would proceed with an intake like you would or other practiced herbalists. And then the students get to see, oh my God, I never would have thought about asking that. I never would have thought about doing that, or the comfort in the body, talking about prostate, talking about hard things. So it isn't to put yourself up against a beginning student and the practitioner. It's just to have it live right there, trained. And so all of them are just so appreciative. There's so many different ways. Paul Bergner and I, we had a council of schools. I know when it was, my son was an infant on my back. It was 27 years ago. We met in Boulder in the winter, and we tried to have a council of schools, 7 songs, Paul Bergner. All of us were sitting around the table. How do we get clinicians out there? And the funny thing is, we didn't have she support or whatever. The stars maybe weren't aligning. But for me, this is what is lacking. So it's
Yeah.
this blame of students, but you really want to sit and watch intakes. I've been doing some of those classes online because that's what's needed.
Yeah.
It's still not the same. It's not the same as sitting in that room and feeling that energy, feeling, so many body language that I'm sure when you're doing an intake, and with the way somebody looks off to the side indicates something, and tongue, you can look at a tongue on Zoom, but it sure
Yeah, it's pretty tough though. It's pretty tough.
is, take
Yeah.
them outside and seeing sunlight. So I think one is sitting in a room and practicing. And so what I've said to folks that, are in other classes of mine, I said, buddy up. Get another herbalist of your caliber, of your training, start a co-practice. Have each other to back each other up, and just say, look, you're getting two of us, we're in practice together, so that you can process, you can watch, you can reflect, you can have that safety. If I've never sat and seen an intake, I mean, as an allopath, I was in the medical room. I had residency. I was it in a rural clinic. I was the only one showing up. There was nobody behind me. So that made me learn. And so bring a buddy, have that support, and start your practice with somebody else and talk it through and go through all the boring stuff with somebody else. Come up with that questionnaire, come up with a waiver, look at your state, be wise about how you enter. And when a client, and maybe some people are like, wild, wise women and men herbalists and want nothing to do with a waiver. And I honor that. I'm not judging how anyone practices. I have a Nigerian teacher who throws the bones, and he reads the bones, and that's how he moves. So I support all ways of assessment. So for folks that are like, I don't want anything to do with files. I mean, Susan Weed 50 years ago was a teacher of mine. She said, how you stay safe is don't write a thing down. So, for wherever Susan is, what
Yeah.
I honor. But back then, that's the best way to stay safe, right?
Yeah, there's some wisdom to it for sure.
Yeah, but
A really good memory.
exactly. So for 5 years, I didn't write anything down. But that was
Wow.
when I had a practice and I had 12 herbs, and I was this radical bioregionalist, and dang it, I was going to have only herbs that grew out my door, and that's what I had. So I knew them.
Wow.
So I could kind of remember my formulas. So, it's an evolution, and to hear the stories of the white-haireds when we didn't even have a computer, let alone internet. Like, I was practicing for what, like 10 years, and I had my first colored apple. Remember those early apples?
Yeah, they're like this big.
Yeah. So, yeah. Anyways.
With that bluish green plastic on the
That's what
side.
I mean. Those colored, it was like, do I want blue? Do I want green?
Yeah.
The game was Froggy or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been there. Like we've hustled. We know what it's like, and we know how to be successful. Maybe not quit your day job yet.
Yeah.
But get the training, get the clinical training, or whatever you want to call that. Get the apprenticeship. And
Yeah.
we use the word clinical, but it can also be apprenticing, and there's a lot of different areas of apprenticing. So I think that might possibly be one of the blocks for people to step into that place of power. It's also when somebody is sharing that intimate, vulnerable place, that's a place of power. And my students, I would tell my students, look, you need a year of therapy before I'm going to complete your year 3. And they're like, yeah. Well, they couldn't afford it because my school wasn't cheap, right? Because it's a toe, as you know. So the first time I met Stephen Buhner at the International Herb Symposium, which is coming up. So the first time I met Stephen Buhner, first class out of the gate, he taught a class, never heard of him, never met him. This was eons ago. Again,
Huh.
you have children now, how you date yourself with your children. My son was
Yeah.
12 years old, so this was 26 years ago. And I met him and I thought, oh, he's my 1 year of therapy.
Hmm.
Because when he talked about depth diagnosis,
Yes. Yeah.
depth diagnostics. So I went
Yeah.
up to him like the little groupie puppy and like, oh my God, oh my God. And I said, will you come? And he came and he started teaching 5 weekend
Oh, no shit. Wow.
in a
Cool.
year. He came and I had him like 3 or 4 years and he came
Wow.
5 weekends and we went deep.
That's awesome. Just on depth diagnostics. Man, cool. I would have loved to have done that. I mean, I've probably read that chapter in Secret Teachings of Plants. I don't know, I can't even tell you how many times. I mean, my copy of that book is in rough shape. I felt really blessed to be able to attend one of his last workshops up in it was a 5-day after Plant Intelligence and the Imaginal Realm came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a 4 or 5 day workshop up in Nelson, British Columbia, and man, that was really cool. That guy he had something. He had a gift. He had a medicine. He had a way of speaking that would kind of. I don't know if you ever experienced that, but he kind of had a way of almost putting you under a little bit of a spell or a little bit of a trance when he would speak, where it's like I'd kind of come out of it like, what just happened? Like, whoa, that like he kind of would hypnotize